Big money, new maps, and the highest stakes in the country. From the race for Attorney General to the showdown for Senate, Battleground Texas is your front row seat. We're talking with the candidates, analyzing the data, and fact-checking the commercials. Don't just watch the news. Understand the strategy. The fight for the Lone Star State starts here. This is Battleground Texas.
Hello, I'm Greg Groogan. Let's jump right into the day's political headlines. And it's all about the head-snapping new statewide numbers from the University of Houston Hobby School of Public Affairs, beginning with the hotly contested Republican primary to succeed Ken Paxton as Texas Attorney General. The Hobby survey has Congressman Chip Roy out in front with 33%. State Senator MAGA Mays Middleton, on the strength of his media blitz, surging into standalone second at 23, followed by Joan Huffman with 13 and Aaron Wrights at 6, with 25% of likely primary voters still undecided. On the Democratic side of the AG ledger, State Senator Nathan Johnson leads with 25%, followed closely by former Galveston Mayor Joe Jaworski at 22%, and Tony Box in third position with 13%. A whopping 40% of voters still undecided in that race as we head into early voting. Now, in the GOP primary for comptroller, Don Huffines leads the pack with 33%, followed by Christy Craddock with 21%, and Abbott-endorsed interim comptroller Kelly Hancock bringing up the rear with just 13%. And finally, the Republican battle for Agriculture Commissioner, which has incumbent Sid Miller walloping the Abbott-endorsed challenger Nate Sheets 48-18. Let's bring in my colleagues Stephen Dial in Dallas and Rudy Koski in Austin, and our political analyst and ace pollster, Mark Jones from both Rice University and the Hobby School. Mark, two things stick out for me with these numbers. First, Mays Middleton's double-digit surge in the GOP primary for Attorney General, and the underperformance by the governor's picks in the races for AG or Ag Commissioner and Comptroller.
Well, right, Greg. Back in the fall when we pulled in this race, we found Chip Roy was the one that was very well known, and Middleton, Huffman, and Wrights were all down in the single digits. Middleton has seen a return on his financial investment. All the money he spent on the campaign commercials, on media placements, on direct mail, on digital advertising, they're paying off, in that it's vaulted him into a clear second place, 10 points ahead of Joan Huffman, and likely simultaneously getting himself into the runoff and keeping Chip Roy down below 50%. You're right then on the the governor's candidates, Kelly Hancock in the controller's race and Nate Sheets in the AG race, Agriculture Commissioner race, are really lagging. I think Hancock has a good chance with all the money that's behind his campaign. Remember, this survey was done before a lot of that came out. He has a good chance to essentially leapfrog Christy Craddock and get into second place and set himself to go into a May runoff against Don Huffines. I don't think there's any way, though, he catches Huffines between now and then. And then Sid Miller's numbers are just really good. He's close to 50% in terms of vote intention. And even though Nate Sheets can bring himself up through all the advertising, unless his campaign goes negative and tries to tear Miller down, it's going to be very tough for him to win on March 3rd.
All right, Stephen, if there's any bright spot in these numbers for contenders down double digits, it's got to be the substantial number of undecided voters still up for grabs in nearly all of these races. Agree, disagree?
Agreed. The undecideds kind of threw me off there, especially when it comes to the Democratic primary for Attorney General, and I know we'll get into that later in the show. 40% of people in that poll still undecided, which means they don't know who the heck the candidates are. And you see some of that in some of the other Republican races as well.
All right, Rudy, what tickles your political fancy in this fresh tranche of numbers from the Hobby School?
I agree with Stephen. The undecided numbers were huge and eye-popping, but the favorability numbers for Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick certainly are red flags, with the governor only getting 51% and Dan Patrick literally underwater with a negative favorability rating. Those numbers could be a warning sign for potential down ballot disaster if they don't improve. The other numbers come from another polling that was done and released by the New York Post today. The people who responded responded to a survey by JL Partners, put the GOP Senate race essentially tied. That's big news for Wesley Hunt, who has trailed in most of the polls that have come out, and maybe why Ken Paxton this week announced that he's going to start doing a campaign tour coming out of that virtual version of the Biden basement, Greg.
All right, okay. We want to hear from you on the topic of elections. Do you think this latest polling reflects poorly on Governor Abbott's ability to influence political races? Yes, or maybe it's just too soon to tell. Scan the QR code, vote and comment, and we'll have those responses a little later for you. Stay with us. Battleground Texas. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Those fresh numbers from the Hobby School are no doubt a sweet elixir for incumbent Ag Commissioner Sid Miller, who has crossed political sabers with none other than Greg Abbott, triggering the governor's endorsement of challenger Nate Sheets. I spoke with a three-term commissioner who didn't mince words about his running battles with our state's chief executive.
I don't dislike the governor. I think he does a pretty good job. But when he attacks agriculture and hurts agriculture, I've got to stand up to him. So during COVID, he picked winners and losers, essential businesses, non-essential businesses, and he shut down agriculture businesses, livestock auction, trailer manufacturers, feed, seed, fertilizer dealers. Well, I'm autonomous from the governor. I have executive authority over the agriculture code. So I had my own executive order and declared any agriculture business, any agriculture related business essential, and you're to stay open. So I opened all those businesses back up. It didn't sit very well with them. I also opened gun shops and florists and landscapers and everybody that I could. When he closed the border to do truck inspections on trucks that had already been inspected, when he did that, it shut the complete border down for a week. We lost $3 billion worth of products rotted on the trucks. We had thousands and thousands of trucks in Mexico that couldn't get back across. The cartels retaliated and set our trucks on fire. So, yes, I called him out on it. He doesn't like to be called out. So it's nothing personal with me. I'm just, as Ag Commissioner, I have to stand up for agriculture and protect it and promote it the best way I can.
Why should you keep your job, and why should folks say no to your Republican primary opponent?
My opponent's not qualified is the reason. He's never lived on a farm. He doesn't have any agriculture education. He never was even a member of 4-H or FFA. So he really doesn't have any agriculture background other than he knows how to bottle honey. Me, myself, I'm an 8th generation farmer and rancher, honors graduate with agriculture education, ag teacher, still make my living off the land. I've got a proven record of running an $8 billion agency very, very successfully. Sunset Commission said, after they reviewed it, said, of all the decades we've been reviewing state agencies, Texas Department of Agriculture is the best run agency we've ever reviewed. So we're pretty proud of that. We think we're doing a good job. Obviously, the most qualified, most experienced.
Mark, let's get right to what Ann Richards used to call the lick log. Nate Sheets is down 30 points with just 20 days to go. Any chance he can make up that kind of ground?
It's always possible if he's willing to spend enough money and his supporters and Governor Abbott's allies are willing to spend enough money, they might be able to get him up. The hard part, though, is that Sid Miller is very popular among many Republican primary voters. About half of them say they would vote for him today, and many of them have been voting for him in 2018 and 2014 and 2022. So you're probably going to have to go negative against Sid Miller. And at the end of the day, that's going to be difficult. I think Sheets can make it a very good election and the most competitive election Miller's had, but it's going to be very tough to actually eclipse him on March 3rd.
All right, Rudy, you heard Sid Miller's counterattack against the governor. I can't wait to get your assessment on that.
Well, you know, Greg, you and I both have covered politics under that pink dome for a very, very long time. And listen, this bad blood between the two, no surprise, and it may actually go back to when Sid was in the House and Abbott was the Attorney General. The water, though, you know, I think it's going to get bloodier. Yesterday, Nate Sheets calling for the Attorney General to investigate recent Ag Department social media posts that sure do look like campaign ads. That's what Sheets is claiming. But the funny thing is about that, Paxton would investigate it, and Paxton's been doing his own office media blitz, sending out several media posts about his opinions and legal action. So it's going to get nasty, Greg.
All right, Stephen, before he was a honey magnate, Nate Sheets was actually an advertising executive. Is it fair to say he's getting a cruel reminder of just how tough it is to build name ID in a state the size of Texas?
You got to spend money to do that, and he just went up with political ads starting today, I believe, for the Ag Commissioner race. And let's go back to Sid Miller, Ag Commissioner, saying it's nothing personal with Governor Abbott. That sounds like he's taking a lot of stuff personal. He says that he's standing up for agriculture, which is his job, what people elected him for. But calling out the governor for things back in 2020 and COVID, that sounds like a Democrat tactic, right? Not a Republican tactic. And then he just really laid into Nate Sheets, saying he wasn't even a member of 4-H. So this race, I believe, is going to get pretty nasty.
All right, Mark, if both of Abbott's endorsees lose in the primary, does that hurt the perception of Governor Abbott's political clout?
I don't think, not in regard to the Ag Commissioner, because Nate Sheets wasn't his recruited candidate. He just endorsed him once the campaign was underway. So I don't think Abbott's as closely tied to the Sheets campaign. On the other hand, he did handpick Kelly Hancock to be controller and has been funding this campaign. So that would be a tougher one for the governor to stomach. Although I think then we'll have until May 26th to know which way that one turns out. And that's quite a bit of time for Governor Abbott to really bring all of his arms to bear and get Kelly Hancock out there in front of Republican primary voters, where he's likely to be successful in a runoff given the support the governor's provided him.
All right, stay with us. There's plenty more Battleground Texas coming your way on the other side of this break.
The new Hobby School poll shows that Dallas County State Senator Nathan Johnson has a very slim lead when it comes to the Democratic primary for Texas Attorney General. 40% of people in that poll still unsure. I talked to Johnson about his new ad.
I think people are really sick of the MAGA brand. I think it's in free fall, and it couldn't happen soon enough.
You are up with now campaign ads, both digital and on air. Texas is an expensive state to campaign in. Do you think those ads a week before early voting will help get your name ID out there?
That's the whole plan. It's a huge state. We got 31 million people. We could have a couple million people voting in the Democratic primary alone. It is essential that we reach across the state, and digital is the best way to do that right now. So we're quite hopeful that these ads are going to penetrate and that they're going to be well received by the public.
What makes this year different, in your opinion, for Democrats?
Well, I think the year is different, and I'd like to think that as a candidate, I'm different. People told me the same exact thing when I first ran for state senate in 2018. No Democrat had taken that seat in over 30 years. It was a -12 Democrat district. I won by 8 points. There were a lot of tailwinds that year, but we also ran a really good campaign, and we connected with voters on the left, in the center, and on the right. And I think that what makes this a very important year, I think it is important that we have one or more Democrats break through on a statewide level. I think it's important to the whole state. I think it's important to the country that we be able to function better as a government. And some Democrats winning statewide, I think, will do that, particularly in the AG's race. I think people are expecting somebody who's willing to stand up to anybody in either party.
Last week, we spoke to one of your opponents, and he talked about your personal life. Do you think that was out of bounds for a campaign?
Oh, it's so beyond the pale. It's out of bounds. And by the way, my family is fully behind me. Every member of my family is fully behind me. And I think that we need to focus on the things that really help Texans, not talk about personal lives. Everybody has a personal life. My personal life is private, and I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of everything in my family life. And so, no, I don't think we ought to be going there.
All right, Greg Groogan, you were in the room asking Jaworski that very question last week. I mean, Democrats get on Ken Paxton about his marital issues. Do you think Nathan Johnson's comments were valid or not?
Stephen, I just got to say, seriously, beyond the pale is what he said. Excuse me, Senator Johnson, but what planet have you been living on? I mean, this is bare-knuckle statewide Texas politics, where frankly nothing is sacrosanct except in most cases the kids. Exhibit A, the guy you were hoping to replace. Ken Paxton's self-professed adultery and marital disintegration have been on full-blown display for a couple of years now. Like it or not, it's part of his record. And according to your opponent, Joe Jaworski, your record too. In the end, it may not matter much in a state where roughly 4 in 10 marriages terminate in divorce, but spare us the beyond the pale sanctimony. You are asking to be the state's top cop, and to some voters, both moral and immoral past behavior matters. Stephen?
Rudy, we aren't really seeing many ads on TV from the Democrats. Do you think now with Johnson paying for one that'll help him on March 3rd?
You know, both sides have got to get their faces and their positions out there. Just talking about divorces and talking about that they don't like Donald Trump, that's not going to get it. You know, the people of Texas want to know what they are going to do and in positions. And they're in the hole to begin with because their party is against things like voter ID. And he voted against the issues in regards to keeping biological males out of bathrooms, and voted against the things in regards to sex changes for children. So those are tough issues that he's got to justify to the state, and how he would coexist with a Republican-led, dominated legislature. So they need to get to the issues and stop throwing mud at each other, in my opinion, there, Stephen.
Mark, 40% unsure. That's a big number when early voting starts on Tuesday. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think while they are doing some advertising, it's very limited digital. Neither the Jaworski campaign nor the Johnson campaign or that of Tony Box, the third candidate, have much in the way of money. And most of the oxygen is going to that Senate race. In our poll, we found that 60% of likely Democratic primary voters don't know who Nathan Johnson nor Joe Jaworski is, and it's a little more for Tony Box. So a lot of people, I think, are going to be going into the polling place and casting a vote for U.S. Senator, and they're going to be learning about the AG ballot being on there when they're in the polling place rather than before.
Okay, we're going to leave it there, but don't go away. More of Battleground Texas to explore on the other side of this break. Welcome back. Skirmishes busting out all over Battleground Texas ahead of the primary. I want to mention the hobby school polling in the Democratic race for governor, where State Representative Gina Hinojosa has a commanding 30-point lead over her nearest rival, Chris Bell. With nearly a third of Democrats still undecided, the question here is whether Hinojosa can pick up the 13% she needs to dispatch the field without a runoff. I'm guessing the answer is yes. Rudy, what's on your radar?
Yeah, a battleground on my radar that's been strangely quiet is the Texas Congressional District 10 race. You know, it was recently redrawn a little bit, but it's still considered to be a Republican stronghold. Incumbent Michael McCall is not running, and the GOP field is a very large one. It is worth watching as we get closer and to the start of early voting, because it sure has been quiet out there. Stephen?
I'm looking at the newly drawn 18th Congressional District down in Greg Groogan territory. Kristen Menifee, he has that energy, and guess what? His name has been on the ballot multiple times in recent memory for voters, and so I'm wondering if they will just remember his name and click yes, and will there be a changing of the guard? Al Green, longtime congressman, but it may be time up for him, guys. All right. That's all time for us today. If you want to see this episode or any of our past ones, go to our station's YouTube channel.
And keep that conversation going on our social media sites.
Tomorrow on Battleground Texas, Republican for Attorney General Chip Roy responding to Mays Middleton's scathing ad, calling the congressman a traitor to MAGA. See you then. Vaya con Dios.